Honorable faculty, dear students, it is such an honor to be here. And that honor is actually multiplied because there's one person in this room who made a big difference in my Louisiana Tech experience, and that's Dr. Napper. It really means a lot to me, Dr. Napper, that you are here. One other person who could not be here, but I am hoping to meet later, is Dr. Hale. He was then the head of the department of biomed, and more than the head, he was like a father figure to me, and you'll see why. Right, so like Dr. Rees mentioned, why he and I connected, and I wanted to know what exactly should I tell you, because there's some bits and pieces of my story. And he said one thing, which is, how did this education help you, especially the interdisciplinary nature of the education? And so what I'm going to do today is try to explain how I connected this experience at Tech with my experience in my first job, and then subsequently the growth that I experienced. I'll leave plenty of time for questions. I'm thinking that my presentation should take no more than 35 minutes, but we'll spend as much time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Now, I also want to make this presentation for you, and I want to do it in the following way. While I'll be talking about my career, but let me start with a generic framework, because I'm going to talk about my career. In my opinion, a career consists of 3 building blocks. Number 1 is this foundation. Very, very critical. It's enduring, and it opens doors. Once you have that foundation, you can then start to build expertise. And that expertise then goes on to scaling your impact across different opportunities, different organizations, and so on. So I invite you to fill up this career framework as you're thinking about your own growth and experiences in whatever position you are today. This is what it looks like for me. It starts off with a foundation in undergrad at an institution called BITS Pilani. Of course, I'm here because of Tech. And you'll see why that was a very, very strong foundation, and later at Wharton. I also had the opportunity to work in 2 different companies where I really built this expertise, one of them being Pearson Education. And I'll touch upon the experiences I got here at Pearson Education and how I was able to do that with the foundation that I got at Louisiana Tech. Later on at Microsoft, and then now Google, where I've just crossed my 17th anniversary, my 5th different role at Google, and who knows what additional chapters will open up. I have to start with the origin. This is my origin. I grew up in a place called Chennai. If you're not familiar with India, the geography of Chennai is it's in the south. It's a very rich heritage city. It's one of the 5 metropolises, very well known for its sandy beaches. You can see miles and miles of sandy beaches, but also very strong culture around temples, architecture, music. And so I grew up in Chennai, and when it was time to move to my growth experiences, there were a couple of things that I really got out of it. One, which was that I actually grew up in a family of engineers. The example I can give you is that my grandfather, who started his career as a lab assistant and went on to become the dean of the engineering school that he was at. He also got a PhD in Imperial College London from a lab assistant. And so he set a very high bar. You can see that. My dad's an engineer. My uncles are engineers. And so with that kind of vibe in the family, I was already preordained, I think, to become an engineer myself. I'm a polyglot, simply put. You can speak multiple languages. I'm not unique, by the way, because a lot of people in India speak multiple languages. If you have been to India, if you cross the state boundary, the language changes, the food changes. I traveled quite a bit in India, and so through that experience, I actually got the benefit of speaking 5 different languages. I had an early career in engineering. It's called disassembly. So I would take apart things. And I'm reminded of the movie Home Alone, you've heard this expression, Kevin! That's when Kevin got called out for something that he shouldn't have done. Well, I felt like Kevin myself, especially when I couldn't put the damn thing back together. So I took apart radios, gramophone records, sometimes motorcycles, name you, and I was able to take that apart. But actually, I learned a lot. That early experience of disassembly gave me that education on how things work and a natural sense of curiosity. Okay? Now, when it came time for getting my undergrad education, I traveled all the way north to a place called Pilani. BITS Pilani is India's #1 private engineering college. Now, why did I go there? Because they actually have a very strong education around, foundation. I'm sorry, I need to go back. They have a very strong program in bio and engineering as well. And I'll explain that why. But I want to pause for a second here and take one liberty with you. I'm going to share all these pivots that I made in my career with a song. And I share that because I remember those experiences through music. Maybe you're like me. Maybe you remember the smells and the sights and the sound when you made that journey. So I invite you to also think about those pivotal moments in your journey where you made a change. For me, it was this song. Oops, I'm sorry. I think my hotspot just decided to turn off. So let me just turn it back on. I apologize. Oh, sorry again. There you go. Okay. If you've not heard that song, it's Walk of Life by Dire Straits. I think it was a perfect metaphor for me because I was just starting to make my walk of my life. I remember that song because that was literally the song that I heard when I first walked into the campus of BITS Pilani. Really, really amazing. Now, BITS, what did I do? I majored in biosciences and engineering, a 5-year program, dual program. I started to develop a strong interest in biology in my high school, which is why I decided to invest in this program. Also, something happened to me in my undergrad, which is something I'll show you. What you're seeing is essentially the wall of my dorm. I was known as the NASA Museum in Pilani in those days. I used to write to NASA and hound them like, hey, send me mission reports, send me photographs. And actually, that's where I learned about biomedical engineering. I used to read the mission reports about the effects of weightlessness in space. A lot of biosciences-based experiments as well in circulation. Right? And so that curiosity, that's when I started to say, hey, this might be something I want to do with the rest of my education. And I set my sights on the master's program. I wanted to pursue a program with 4 different considerations in mind. The first one is I wanted it to be interdisciplinary. I wanted to leverage the biosciences, but also the engineering. I cared about the reputation. I wanted to experience America in its entirety, not just on the coasts. A lot of students in India tend to go to the coast, but I said, no, I wanted to go somewhere I could actually not only learn, but also experience the culture. And the cost was a factor. Coming from a very modest means, I wanted to make sure that I could afford the education. And so it was with pride when I received the enrollment offer from Louisiana Tech, and I immediately signed and said, yes, I'm coming. Right? And I, of course, made that 8,000-mile journey across the pond, if you will, and landed in Bulldog territory. And as I was coming into Ruston, one song was playing in my mind. When I was a little bitty baby, my mama would rock me in the cradle. Got me back home. She was down in Louisiana, just about a mile from Texas. I could have been John Fogerty, believe me. I heard that song so many times, but you have to remember that my experience of America was through songs, and it was CCR, John Fogerty, who sang so eloquently about being in Louisiana, right? That was what was playing in my mind when I took that first journey from Baton Rouge and came down to Ruston. The first step was adjustment. Coming from a different country, you have to learn the culture, you have to make sure that you try to fit in, and so it was a lot of explorations. I quickly learned as well at that time that there was a program or a concentration in neural networks. I'll talk about that. Speech research and DSP, digital signal processing. There was one gentleman here who really played a very strong role in my first days at Louisiana Tech, Dr. Napper. Dr. Napper, you may not remember this, but you spent 2 hours with me going through every page of my transcript from my undergrad, and you really invested that time and made sure that you could advise me on what I could be seeking out as experiences. It was a gift to me because, number one, I felt that someone cared. 2, I immediately felt that I had someone who can help me navigate those first steps. And there was also a sense of sponsorship. So thank you, Dr. Napper, for that initial period where you did that guiding, and later on as well. Now, I also assisted in those days, the building of Louisiana Tech was on Vienna Avenue, I remember, and I assisted in the Biomed Rehab Center dorm. This was a very, very pivotal experience for me. Let me tell you a little bit about the dorm. The dorm was in the ground floor, or the first floor of the building. It had students who had disabilities, very often quadriplegics or people with cerebral palsy. My role was to assist them, which meant that I would actually accompany them to the classes. I would actually help them with their daily living sometimes, but also camaraderie. Right? I got to spend time with them, and I got to appreciate a few things. One of them being empathy. What is empathy? Empathy is nothing but it means you understand the predicament of somebody. Why are we here in engineering today, in biomed? We're here to make the lives of people better. I got that appreciation from that experience in being in the dorm, seeing how people can really struggle with just being independent. And that empathy is what motivated me in my master's program very quickly after that. But actually there's also a very strong connection that empathy is what is helping me today in my role, because I'm in a role where I have to understand users and help the product become successful. This is the gentleman here, Dr. Abdul Hamid. He was my advisor, and Dr. Ed Goshorn. They had a very strong collaboration between the engineering department and audiology department. This is where that interdisciplinary nature of the program is coming in, right? It was just not a pure biomedical or traditional sense. It was also these cross-collaborative relationships. And the goal was to build assistive devices for people with disabilities using that technologies, neural networks, and so on. And again, like I touched upon, that biomed dorm experience really motivated me a lot, because I could see that reality of what disabilities people experience. Now, I'm going to walk through a little bit of detail here and tell you what my master's thesis was all about. What you're seeing is a neural network. If you use ChatGPT, if you use Google Bard, this is the basic premise of everything that's running there. Right? In those days, it was art. It wasn't science. It wasn't business. But today it has become. What is a neural network? You feed in information. Here it's a picture of a cat. That cat is pixelized and it's made into feature vectors. And then you train this network and say, hey, if I feed this image, what would come out? And it is 98% certain that this is an image of a cat. That's the foundation of the neural network. Now, what did a speech recognition neural network look like? You fed in time series data, right? It's, you break up speech into different patterns, and this time series is fed in as a feature vector, and you train it on an output. So if you see, for example, the word hello, it has 4 phonemes. Phoneme is the unit of the language, H, E, L, O. Right? So you feed in that hello in a digital vector, and you train it, and there comes the output. Now, what did we do to help people with disabilities? There's one thing that we observed, which is that if you are around people who have a disability, especially from a speech perspective, the people who are used to the speech patterns, they actually recognize the speech. Why? Because most of the errors that are produced by people with disabilities, they're consistent. So the real hypothesis was that you could build a recognition system using those errors as a feature, which people hadn't thought about before, right? So that is the premise of my master's thesis. We found some success. This is one of the papers that I published with Dr. Gauchon and Dr. Abdul Hamid. This was presented at the 12th Biomedical Engineering Conference in New Orleans, right? So I want to talk a little bit about the culture in the department. Dr. Napper probably recognizes the lady here, Celia Wall, amazing lady. She really made sure that not only I fit in, I'm integrated, and I'm happy and productive, but she also made sure that the entire community was. I want to say thanks to Celia for making my experience extra special. It was a very proud day when I got to wear the robe. That's my happy smiling face. I had a mustache in those days, if it's not apparent. I gained a foundation in speech technologies, neural networks, digital signal processing. I talked about empathy. That's where I gained that empathy and great relationships as well. And so it was time to make a pivot. I decided to go to the coast, the fabled, cynical Silicon Valley, and there was one song that was playing in my mind. There were plenty of room at Hotel California, but I was hoping plenty of jobs because I really needed a job. It took about a month and a half, but I landed at a place called Pearson Education. Pearson Education is a very big publishing house. Computer Curriculum Corporation is the e-learning part of that group. Right? They did K-12 tech publishing, which simply put is you're helping kids, K-12, using computer-assisted curriculum to enhance their educational experience. Mid-sized company, 400 employees, $100 million in revenue. And my role, initial role was media experiences software engineer. What does that mean? It means that I was responsible for all of the media technologies in the product, video, audio, streaming protocols, and everything else. Here, something happened. One day, in the 3rd year of my job there, my boss walked up to me and said, Raghu, we have a problem. Like Houston, we have a problem. Well, Raghu, we have a problem. I said, what's happening? Tell me more. And he said, we have a ship blocker. Wow, a ship blocker is literally terror in the minds of software engineers, because that means that your product is not going out of the door, right? And very likely, it is not going out because it's in the final stages of going out, right? So actually, let me show you the problem. And this is where that education at tech is going to come in. Right? Let me show you the problem.
Look after me. This is Kate. She went up the neck.
It's pretty obvious, right? The words are not synchronized with the audio. Well, a media experiences engineer, that's my problem. Now, let me explain what was going on here. This is the setup. This is, by the way, a lot of the students in this room, you have to remember that we didn't have internet. So 40 kilobits per second is laughable, but it was the reality in that day. I'll also respectfully submit that, while this might not directly apply to today, every world that I know of has limitations. It has variables, and you have to often optimize for those variables. So all that I want you to take away from this is, how would you optimize for the world of today, not the specifics itself. Right? So this is the situation. We had our stuff on a server, relied on a thin client because schools were not very rich. They had to really optimize these machines. And so we relied on the specification that average bandwidth is 40 kilobits per second. So when we wanted to play something, we wanted to have two timers. We had one timer sitting on the server, another on the client, and when somebody wanted to hear that particular piece of curriculum, and they pressed enter, we relied on this connection, this 40 kilobits per second connection, to make sure that we could synchronize. But the reality was that when the network used to degrade, occasionally, the experience went wonkers, right? And that is why it was a ship blocker. Now, we didn't catch it in the lab because we were designing for a 40 kilobits per second. You could argue that, hey, if the spec is wrong, it's not my problem, but it's a ship blocker. The CEO knows about it. I have to fix it, right? I can't wait for 6 months and revenue lost and then layoffs and so on. So I explained that this is how it is. Like if we relied on 40 kilobits per second, everything worked fine. 2 kilobits per second, stuff broke. Same thing here. My education in Louisiana Tech comes in here. I'm going to a little bit more detail. In audio, when you pack up speech into a compressed piece and then you play it back, it is at a fixed band rate. And here, I'm using the example that it is at 11 kilobits per second. Right? So what I did essentially is I said, to hell with the timer server, and the server-based timer. I'm not even going to worry about that. I'm just going to create a timer on every client that relies on how much audio is played. And then it can know that, hey, if I only played 2 seconds of audio, don't move that video to anything more than 2 seconds. Right? And this would scale because I could use this timer on every client. No matter what the bandwidth looks like, it's just going to work, because if you didn't receive enough audio, you will not allow the video stream to go forward. And so the experience, the end user experience, is going to be fine. And indeed it was, this is the experience.
Look after me. This is Kate. She went up the net.
So it was a very proud day. I remember that. It was 2 a.m. in the morning, driving back home. The weight of the world had lifted from my shoulders, because a ship blocker is a big deal, right? But I also gained something from that. I quickly learned that there's a whole world beyond engineering. And I learned that product success is a function of market fit, the perception of the customer, marketing, sales, engineering, and more. Simply put, when I fixed that problem, a lot more people got to know about me, and that opened up some doors. I got to meet with marketers. I got to meet with salespeople. I got to meet with some product managers. And that's when I struck the curiosity, but also the ambition that I wanted to be more than an engineer. I wanted to be someone who could build the experiences around products. And I resolved to pursue a full-time program. My criteria was, I cared about the reputation. I wanted the class to be diverse, and the location as well. And it was also a very proud moment when I was offered enrollment at a place called Wharton. And so I made that pivot one more time. And there was one song that was playing in my mind. I did feel like Rocky Balboa in Rocky, the movie Rocky. Wharton has a very rigorous program, so I was pretty aware. So I did feel that I had to build up my stamina. At Wharton, I really found a lot of value in the diversity of the class. We have people from Wall Street, we have people from consulting, we have people from all over the world, a class of 780, right? So that diversity really benefited me. My concentration was in marketing, strategy, and venture capital. I remember one of my seminal experiences was participating in a business plan competition, and that really helped me really apply some of that early thinking around, hey, what happens when I'm building a product? Can I convince some people to come join me and then win this competition? But I also decided that I want to stay in high tech because I didn't want to dilute the benefit of my engineering and the experience I gained at Pearson Education. And so when it was time to make yet another pivot, I got an offer from a place on the West Coast, a place called Microsoft. And as I was making this journey, there was one song that was playing in my mind. Again, John Fogerty. Seattle is very well known for its rain, so I remember that journey. At Microsoft, I was a product manager for their first software as a service product, a product called Live One Care. One of the things that I did was really built up a very strong foundation on understanding the user. We call that focus on the user. I made a trip to Atlanta. This was a product that was still on the drawing board. So we had to interview some potential customers to figure out what do they think about security. Like what are the features that we value? What is the price point that they would value? So that was really, again, a very foundational experience. But I also learned to navigate a very large tech company. Microsoft had about 60,000 employees at that time. When you have that big a company, it's half the battle is to really to jump through these different functions to get things done. And really benefited a lot. Spent 4.5 years there. And then, as I was getting closer to the 5th-year mark, there was a strong desire to come back to the Valley, the Silicon Valley. And so I reached out to a couple of my classmates from Wharton who were at a place called Google. And I said, hey, is there any role for me? It was 2006, and I found a role in Google. And as I was making that trip, there was one song that was playing in my mind. You can check out making, and only 20 remain. In this case, I'm illustrating this for the enterprise sales funnel. The reality is that 80% of the prospects are lost because they don't make it to the funnel, which itself was an irony because you have engaged with these people. Wouldn't it be better to continue that relationship? You have spent money, you have spent money making them aware, educating them, and so on. And so my idea, 20% idea was, what if we personalize these engagements? Right? And here's how we did it. This is the product. The product is in this example being sold. This is selling Google for Work, the early days of Google Workspace, to Tesla. You can see that Tesla can understand, learn about everything that Google can offer to them through this personalized URL. All the content on this site is made for Tesla because we know which industry they are. We know who we're talking to, whether we're talking to the CFO, the CTO, the CIO. So that role plays a very big role. And then we personalized even more based on what sales stage they are. Sales stage has many different filters. So you personalized it based on the stage they are. But the value prop or the value proposition for someone internally to Google is that we know when they're visiting the site. So what content are they checking out? How often are they on the site? And therefore, the sales rep can personalize or they can prioritize that engagement. And that's very important in a sales context. It's also applicable in an educational context. Think about it. 100 students come in, 20 only enroll. You still have a relationship with those 80 because they are not students today, but they can be students later, right? Through higher ed learning, skill development, and so on. So there's a lot of applicability. The idea was that this was going to be the product that we would syndicate or sell to anyone who wants to personalize engagements with their customers. The project was very successful. Why? Because I got to work on it 5 years. I built a team around it. We shipped it to 20 customers. In 2016, for various reasons, the project was sunset. In a big company, these things happen. It happens because of prioritization, not because there's no merit in it, but it was a fantastic learning for me. I felt like I just built a company without investing a dime of my personal money, but because of the largesse of Google and allowing me to do the 20% project. Okay. What I'm doing today. So since 2016, I'm in a product operations role. So these are the products that my team supports. Gmail being the biggest, 3.2 billion users. User feedback comes in through the product feedback. They can go to the community. They can go to the help center, or they can complain on Twitter. If you have issues about Gmail, I'm happy to answer them today for you. Not just Gmail, but any of the products there. We have a pretty strong engineering around classification. All this feedback, that's about 30 million pieces of feedback, by the way, on an annualized basis. Right? So you have to be building classification mechanisms so that you can understand what are the main friction points for the users and how can you remove them from the product so that the product can become better. And what comes out of this is insights, and this is used by the product team so that they can help the product become better. Right? So that's what I do today. Here's what I've learned. A solid foundation builds confidence. It did for me. If you look at me, I have not done pure biomedical engineering, but I did start with that foundation, applied that knowledge. I gave you the example of solving very critical problems, and that opened up options for me. And no surprise, but relationships and a positive culture matter. The positive culture matters, and I'll talk about that because there is this gentleman who's not here, but he was very responsible for setting up a very positive culture. Of course, Dr. Napper played a big role there too. Right? Culture matters, right? Why? Because you can give the best that you can be. You can be the best you can be if you're in a place that cares about growing you and helping you become the best. Dr. Hale was that person. He would walk up to the lab. He would just take a genuine interest in what I'm doing. Not just me, but all the other students as well. But he did something that also touched me deeply. And in fact, it is my most treasured possession from Louisiana Tech. And let me show it to you. I'll read it out. The faculty and staff of Biomed department would like to let you know how proud we are of your son. Raghu received the first prize, master's level, at 11th Biomed Engineering Conference in Memphis. This is quite an honor. It's brought recognition to Raghu, but also the department. You should be extremely proud of his accomplishments. This is the significance of what culture means. I've learned this because I've spent some time in the leadership ranks, and Dr. Hale didn't have to do this for me. After all, I'm a regular student, but you can see that how this deeply touches someone. And I just want to say thank you, Dr. Hale. I know that I'll be meeting him later today, but thank you, Dr. Hale, for giving me this love and affection and also the recognition and also the honor of coming and speaking to you today. I leave you with this framework. Again, I invite you to make it your own. The foundation that is enduring and opens doors. It fills out the professional toolkit, and you can then apply that expertise to scale your impact. I do want to say thank you to a couple more people. I want to say thank you to my parents, because without their investment, literally funding that first semester's or first quarter's tuition bill at Louisiana Tech, I would not be here today. It's also their investment in the education that I got. And I also want to say thank to my dear family here, Anu, my wife, Ananya, my daughter, and Rohan, my son, because they allow me to do stuff at Google, because without their cooperation, I cannot be successful. Get in touch with me. I'm happy to help anyone in this room, and whoever is not in this room as well. My email, my LinkedIn, I will help anyone and everyone with Google referrals. We're talking to Devin about internships and potentially more. I have some Google swag there. Feel free to grab it. And with that, I will end. Thank you very much for the honor. I hope this has been useful for you. And I wish many, many, many more years of glory and accomplishments for Louisiana Tech. God bless Louisiana Tech.